So the forecasting process. So forecasting is not a very difficult process. It just can be time consuming, and oftentimes you're going to be using a lot of data to create your forecast. So if you're interested in big data, forecasting might be for you. So let's go ahead and look at the process here. So first we have to decide, what are we going to forecast? That's probably a pretty good first step. Are we trying to forecast future sales? Are we trying to forecast quantities that we need or the customer demand? Are we trying to forecast the weather? What are we trying to forecast? Then next we're going to try to analyze the data. Now we might have to go and try to find this data. So like if we're trying to find weather, well, we might have to look at barometric pressure. We might have to look at the Farmer's Almanac. We might have to look at the past several years worth of data. We might have to look at all these different things. We might even have to look at the gravity of the Earth at the time, or the magnetic pole, or all these different factors maybe. Or we just poke our head outside and take a look. It could be something that simple. So we have to select the forecasting model. So there's many different models we can pick, and in this video is too short to go over that. But when we try to decide what we're forecasting in the data we pick, are we doing something short term? Are we doing something long term? How long is our forecasting? That will have a huge impact on our model that we actually end up choosing. But then we create the forecast. So we're actually going to put the data into Microsoft Excel and create a chart. Or we're going to use some other software. It might be Salesforce, might be SAP, might be any of the other software packages out there. But we're going to create a forecast. And then we're going to take a look at that forecast and say, is this realistic? Is this accurate? And once you get more experience with creating forecasts, you're going to be able to take a look at it and say, no, this is not accurate. This is crazy. Or you might be able to look at it and say, yeah, this is pretty good. And then you might also want to take a look at, well, what's the degree of accuracy here? Is it 95%? Is it 90? Is it 70? Is it a 3% accuracy? What accuracy level is there? If it's not to the accuracy level that you need, or confidence level, you might have to go back and add more data. So you might have to go back to and choose more appropriate data. So when the data comes out, and let's say you put it into a chart form that's over time, so like you selected a forecast that's over time, let's say you look at it and it looks like one of these four charts that's on the screen. Well, you can have a level, or sometimes called horizontal pattern, where it's going up and down, but it seems like it's level or horizontal overall from left to right on the chart. But there's another one. If it goes up or down when you're going left to right, it's called a trend. So it's trending up or trending down. So or increasing or decreasing as you go left to right. But then we have seasonal. So if you're trying to find a product and it's not on store shelves, well, it might be a seasonal item, right? Well, customer demand at, let's say, the middle of the summer might not be very high for winter coats. So winter coats might start coming around in August, for example. And bathing suits might start coming out in March, April timeframe. So that could be a sign of a seasonal pattern where the sales of these items might start increasing up until they hit a peak, and then they start decreasing until they hit a low. And then the cycle repeats. And it seems like year on year, the cycle just repeats itself. So this would be a seasonal pattern. But then we also have this cycle pattern. Cycle is very similar to seasonal as it goes up and down, but it's one key aspect that makes it different than a seasonal pattern or any of the other patterns that are shown. Cycle doesn't have a regular pattern. So as you can see on the screen here, the cycle pattern is going up, so it's trending up, but then it trends down. It's going up and down, so it looks like it might have some seasonal going on. Every couple months, it looks like it might be going up because the time frame is in quarters, so every 3 months. So it's not regular. So this would be a cycle. So I hope that makes sense. So how do we select our forecasting method? Well, we have to understand what our end user of this forecast wants. And then we have to determine the amount of data that we need and the type of data. And we have to make sure that data is available. So if our intended user of this forecast wants historical information over the last 5 years of sales of this one product to kind of predict what's going on for a similar product that's going to be put into manufacturing, so they can try to estimate customer demand and sales. Well, do you have 5 years of data? It should be able to say yes or no. And do you have sales data? Because that would be the type of data you need. The amount would be 5 years. Now, do you want to also take into account maybe returns? If something's sold, that's great, but what about maybe taking off what is returned? If you have a 10% return rate on your item, well, that will definitely impact your forecast. And if your customer needs a 90% accuracy, well, you got to make sure that your data can support that. And then we have the length of our forecast horizon. How far into the future do they want us to forecast? Are they trying to forecast a year? Or are they trying to forecast 10 years? Or are they trying to forecast the first 30 days of a new product release? So the shorter the forecast horizon, the more impact that you can't account for. So those macro and microeconomic factors are definitely going to have an overt impact, where the longer terms kind of smooth those out. And then the data patterns, the patterns of the data, as the screen says, is going to be impacted by the length of the forecast horizon. So the shorter it is, you're going to have probably a more chaotic pattern. But if you're factoring a long term, you're probably going to start smoothing out and be more of a trending line rather than a cycle or cyclic line. So these are the forecasting process that we would go through. Now, yes, we did not use an example because it's very difficult to walk you through this process if we are jumping around with an example. But just have an idea of what forecasting is, because you've probably done this. You might have tried to come up with a budget. You're forecasting that you're going to spend X number of dollars on tuition, and you're going to spend it here and here, fall and spring and maybe summer. Well, you're forecasting your budget. Never thought of it that way, did you? You might have thought about just, I need to make this much money by that time. Well, you can kind of look at, over the years, you spent this much, you should try to save up this much money to pay for your next semester of classes. So that's one form of forecasting. So since we've talked about forecasting, let's talk about the other part of this topic, which is integrated business planning.